It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Smooth and Savvy is joined by some of the hottest talent in the entertainment industry, from musicians to authors and all those in between. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here he is, Mr. Smooth and Savvy himself, Douglas Coleman.
Hello. How are you? Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. We don't have much time. Michaelbrent Collings is here today. Full show interview. He is an internationally best-selling novelist and a multi-Bram Stoker Award nominee, and a really nice guy. The unedited version of this interview ran an hour and 20 minutes. As much as I hate to edit good content, it did have to be edited. So we got it down to the normal 55 minutes of the show. One note about the interview. In the middle of the interview, my dog decided to interrupt us, and I had to stop and I had to tend to the dog. Although you can't hear the dog in the interview, there is a gap there, and which I took out, but you'll hear me say, oh, I got to stop for a second. Sorry, and then come back. When I came back, I completely lost my train of thought, and we started on a different tangent. Normally, I would have just edited that out, but it was kind of funny the way it played, and to keep the continuity of the tangent, I needed to leave that in. So you'll hear that about halfway through the interview. Just some more strange things on the Douglas Coleman Show.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
In-house production and recording in Louisiana Publishing Company is now offering a special for podcasters on their CD Pro Radio network. For just $20 a month, CD Pro Radio will broadcast your podcast twice a week on their network. This is a great and inexpensive opportunity for podcasters to gain some exposure for their show without having to spend a lot of money. Please check them out at cdproradio.com. That's cdproradio.com.
Go listen, download, and subscribe to The Douglas Coleman Show. It's available at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS. Also on iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube. The Douglas Coleman Show is an internationally syndicated talk and music show that features fascinating and sometimes famous guests from all aspects of the entertainment industry. The topics can range from light and fluffy to sober and serious. Our focus is on music artists, but we also feature producers, authors, directors, and even promoters. The Douglas Coleman Show. Sometimes chat, sometimes music, always entertaining. Again, it's available today at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS. You can also connect with them on Facebook at Douglas Coleman Show 1, follow on Twitter at Douglas Coleman 3, and you can even find them on TuneIn Radio. Again, that's the Douglas Coleman Show at the website douglascolemanmusic.com/DCS, iTunes, Spreaker, YouTube, and more. Go listen, download, subscribe, and share with your social networks today.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto!
Wrong hat.
I take a 7.5.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome Michaelbrent Collings. Hi, Michaelbrent. How are you?
I am fantastic. How are you doing?
Oh, doing very well. We were just before the show, we were just talking about Idaho versus Los Angeles. And
oh, God.
there would be no contest as far as where I would prefer to live. LA is like one of those places that everybody sort of has to be there, particularly if you're in the entertainment industry. Yeah. It used to be nice. I can remember my father saying things like, oh, I used to love driving down Hollywood Boulevard and seeing all the orange trees. You know, I thought, wow, that was a nice time, I'm sure. But there ain't no orange trees anymore. No, definitely not.
Although I do miss, people say, you know, are you sad to have moved? And I'm really not, but I do miss the restaurants. They have a lot of really good food in California, in Los Angeles area. And it was nice being next to Disneyland, you know. That's always kind of cool.
Yeah, Disneyland's cool. And you're right, there is a lot of great places to eat. There's lots to do. I don't know. Given the choice, though, I would live in New York before I lived in
Nice.
LA. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never lived in New York, but I probably, given the choice between going back to LA and starting in New York, I'd probably go to New York too.
I lived in New York in the early 80s for a couple of years when I was a struggling actor / musician. And it's a real city. You know, LA to me is like one big Denny's connected by a bunch of freeways. But, you know, that's really all it is.
That's a fairly accurate assessment. Only it's a Denny's that is populated by highly beautiful people.
Yes, plastic people.
Yes.
Highly plastic people. Well, that's true. Where New York is real. You know, New York is just people are, you know, they haven't got time for you. They're getting to their place. When you stop and actually talk to people in New York, they tell you exactly what's on their mind. There's no pretension. Yeah. There's no, that plastic Hollywood sort of attitude where they're smiling at you, but they really want to kill you. It just, I don't know, something about it just doesn't work for me.
No, but hypocrisy makes the world go round, right?
Well, it has so far. Yes, that's true. Let's talk about you, since you are my guest on the show. Give us a little background on yourself. Tell us what your story is up to this point in your life.
Well, like a lot of people, I grew up and I had a grown-up job. I was a lawyer for about a decade, and then I was writing on the side because I always wanted to be a writer, but I did not want to be, that 40-year-old guy who lives in his mom's basement and is bringing women down, being like, I'm gonna make it big any day, baby, So I became a lawyer so I could pay bills, and I had a family, and then about 10 years into that, I started making money as a writer. I sold several screenplays to some production companies, and they made movies out of those. And at the same time, I also started writing novels, and it just kind of grew. So I was able to stop being a lawyer, and yes, I'm actually purchasing my soul back on an installment program. And now I write full time. I write screenplays and I write books. I mostly am known for horror. So I'm one of the top indie horror writers in the United States, and multiple Bram Stoker Award nominee, and all sorts of cool stuff like that. But I also write science fiction and fantasy and comedy and thrillers and kind of anything that I'm excited to do. And it's very nice that my fans have allowed me that leeway. They do get a little irksome, or a little irked, I should say, not irksome, because it's fine with me, but they make it clear that they want something scary if I wait too long between horror novels. So I usually write 2 or so a year, but in between that I write young adult and I write fantasy, like I say, whatever I feel like. So like the last book I wrote is called The Longest Con, and it's a monster murder mystery set in a Comic Con starring me and some other really big authors like Kevin J. Anderson and Larry Correia and people like that, and it's just been really nice to be able to sort of explore whatever I feel like exploring without having somebody breathing down my neck and saying, now you have to write this, now you have to write that, now you have to write that.
Well, it sounds like you're kind of your own motivator for writing, because 2 a year plus other short stories, that's a lot of work. I mean, you're going to be writing a lot.
Yeah. Well, and actually that's just the horror novels. I mean, typically I write between 4 and 8 a year. This year I have slowed down considerably, and I think at this point I've written 400,000 words so far this year.
Wow.
And so I am my own motivator. I'm very uncomfortable not being productive in some way. And I try and spend time with my family. I try, be a good dad and a good husband and all that. But if I'm not with them, I'm working. For sure. And people do ask, they say, how do you do that? And part of it's just the process of putting your bottom in a seat for 8 hours and refusing to be distracted by other stuff.
Well, the interesting thing about that, though, I mean, I'm not a writer in that regard, but I am a songwriter. And don't you ever get writer's block? I mean, don't you ever sit down and you get up in the morning, you have your tea or your coffee, sit down and say, okay, it's time to write. Clock ticking, tick, 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 and nothing, zero.
I don't, and I think part of it is because I have a mindset that's a little different. My attitude is most people equate that when they think of writing, they think of actually typing, like physically putting words on a page, and for me, that's a subset of writing. So I was a lawyer, like I said, and I would go in, and I was never permitted, like if my managing partner came in and saw me staring at nothing and said, "What's going on?" and I said, "I just have lawyer's block," he would, I would have been fired. So I kind of treat my business as a writer in the same vein. Now, sometimes I was staring at nothing as a lawyer, but I wasn't doing nothing. I was trying to figure out the next argument I was going to make, or some really cool metaphor that would wow the judge, or whatever it might be. But that's still part of the job. So if I'm sitting there and thinking about what to write next, as soon as I throw down my computer and say, I can't get it, that's me giving up and having writer's block. But as long as I'm sitting there and thinking what should happen next and trying to be productive, that's not writer's block. That's writing. That's part of figuring out a cool story. And if I'm not coming up with anything, then I'll say, okay, I need to refresh a little bit, and I'll read a book for an hour, or I'll go to a movie. But I won't just turn my brain off. I'll go to the movie and watch for story ideas, or say, how could I have done this better or different? What works about this character? And by the time I'm done, I'm usually ready to go again with the typing part of my story. So no, I never allow myself to sit down and just go, I can't do it today. I'm not feeling it. There's always something going on. And maybe what I'm doing right now isn't the most productive use of my time, and that's acceptable, in which case I'll switch gears to something more productive. But I never sit down and go, I just can't feel anything. I'm not coming up with an idea, so I'm going to have writer's block today. That's just, I don't do it. I don't let myself do it. And I don't think it's necessary that anybody does it if they get into that mindset of like, I can do something. Maybe it's not this, but I can find some part of my job to pursue right now that will be the most productive use of my time. And if you do that, you are going to start cranking out pages.
I wish I had that ability, because for me as a songwriter, the inspiration for the song typically comes when I'm doing 40 other things, not thinking about the song at all. I'll be driving. That's where I got a lot of my good songs, was I'd just be driving. I'll be alone in the car, and how your brain kind of wanders when you're driving, and then all of a sudden, like a phrase or a couple of notes in a melody, or the phrase and the couple of notes will all come together. And it'll be like, ding, that's it. Okay. Yep. And then I have to like rush home and get to the piano and finish the song. Okay. But I can't just sit down and make that happen. It just doesn't work for me.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I actually do that too. But again, you're recognizing where you're being productive. And if the way you kind of jumpstart is by allowing your mind to wander, again, but people say like, I'm having writer's block, which they kind of equate it with, I've failed at my job, I'm not being creative. And the reality is, maybe you are being creative, because asking a question, figuring out that storyline, figuring out that melody line, however your process is, that's part of the job. Nobody anywhere just sits down, writes for 10 hours, finishes, the next day writes for 10 hours, and does that every day until they die. Because it's not a single faceted process. Writing or creative projects are jewels with many facets. And some days you're not going to work on this facet. The other one is what needs shining up. And that's totally legitimate. I just hate people selling them short and saying, I get writer's block, so I can't do it. Because I would rather they think, I'm having a day where I'm thinking. I'm having a day where I'm researching. And those are all writing, because typing isn't writing any more than just sitting down and playing piano in a lounge bar is the only way of doing music. It's this huge involved process. And the more you recognize there's other things that can be done, the more productive you're going to be. Very often I'll have a day, like you said, my wife will come in and she'll see me not typing and picking up the car keys, and I say, I'm going driving, and I've got a pad in my hand on my lap, and I will drive through the beautiful fields that are around my house, and I'll drive for 3 or 4 hours and pull over every 5 minutes, jotting down a new idea that came into my mind. But I'm not just driving with no purpose. Just like you went out and were letting your mind go so you could be your most creative, because you recognize that as a process that works for you. And I have the same process. I love doing that. But again, that's not to say you're not doing your job or you're stuck. That's just you going, here's how I'm going to get my answer. And I think that's awesome. That's an incredibly wonderful use of a creative person's time, is coming up with the next answer.
Well, all right, let me approach this from the other end then. Can you ever switch it off?
No. Easy answer.
Okay. So you're writing, or you're in the writing process, whether you like it or not. You just can't shut it off. Okay.
Yeah. So like my wife is very supportive, and I love her deeply. And one of the things that she understands is she sees this look in my eye, and I'll stand up from the table and I'll walk away from dinner, and I'm not disappearing for long, but she knows, and she's told the kids, she's like, Daddy's not mad. He's just on a mission. And so I get up and I run to my room or wherever, my tablet or a pad of paper, anything that I can write on, and I write down the idea, and then I come back and rejoin the table. Because it's always going in the back of my mind. And I had a vacation, my first real vacation in almost 12 or 13 years happened a couple months ago. And I didn't even set the vacation up. My wife and my best friend colluded, and he showed up and kidnapped me and took me away for a week.
Nice.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It was a huge surprise. And that was the first time I kind of turned everything off, because I didn't bring any books. I didn't bring any, typing. I didn't bring any pads of paper. And we were busy 24/7. We went to Hawaii, so there was a lot of swimming and a lot of, hiking and stuff that really keeps you busy. Other than that, 24/7. I wake up 2 a.m. and I have a story idea. I deal with it and then go back to sleep. And if I'm playing with my kids, I scream for my wife to come in, and she takes over with the game for 2 minutes while I can run off and do my story idea and then come back.
Well, it was interesting that, how we were talking about, I get the song ideas and stuff when I'm driving. A lot of where my creative process works is, like I said, when I'm distracted or when my mind is occupied with something else. What I can't do is sit down and say, Tuesday at 8:00, okay, I'm going to go write a song now. That never works. Okay. My setup that I have is I've got a recliner, just a big leather recliner. I've got 2 computers set up, one on each side with big monitors, 27-inch monitors. And then, like one on the left, one on the right. I'm like, double mousing. And then I've got a 50-some-odd inch, 60-inch, I think, flat screen that's on the wall directly in front of me, 8-10 feet away. Okay. And then I've got my phone, my smartphone. So I'm looking at 4 screens basically all at once, The one on the left has just got Facebook and that going. The one on the right's got a flight simulator program on it. The TV will be on whatever's on. I think it's on the Olympics right now. And then, my phone, I'll be playing Angry Bird or doing something like that. And all of that stimulus keeping my brain busy, and then a song will come in, a piece of a song. And it's the strangest thing to me, because I always thought that one needed to clear their mind in order to have that creative process. Maybe that whole concept is bullshit. People went to the mountain and meditated and trying to clear their head of all their thoughts. And, for me, the more clutter in there, the better it is, the better chance I have of getting a song out.
Yeah. And, and you said a couple of things that I think are really worthwhile for people listening who are creatives. And number one is, like, your process is going to be different than mine. I do go and sit in a seat and I work, and other people need the huge, by the way, yours sounds much more pleasant. A lounger and a bunch of screens and keeping yourself distracted. That's what works for each individual person, and that's fine. But I think there are some similarities though, because just like you sit there and sort of distract yourself until your subconscious tells you what to do. That's what my brain is doing at other times of the day, which is why I jump up during dinner and have that flash of insight, because I'm not sitting there noodling over story ideas consciously while pretending to care for my family. At least I hope I'm not. So my brain gets helped by that distraction as well. And the secret is just kind of, and it is a thing that you experiment with over time, which is why people want to have this huge hit right out of the gate, the huge big song if you're a songwriter or a singer, the huge movie, the huge book, whatever it is. But the problem with that is most of the people who do that never do anything good again, because you don't want to have a one-hit wonder. You want to have a career. And the way to establish a career is to find out what process creates you benefit and return on investment consistently over time. And so now, after having written my whole life and having done this full-time professionally for the last 6 years, I've got kind of a stable, this works. And I know it works because I've practiced it over time. You have your Barcalounger method of inspiration.
Right.
And it's funny you mentioned the Olympics, because I very often liken it to the Olympic athletes, like a pole vaulter. The world champion pole vaulter is not the one who's the best in the world, is not the one who can do it the very best. The world champion pole vaulter is the one who can do it most well, most consistently.
Well, that's very true.
So
Yeah.
there's somebody out there. Yeah, there's somebody out there who can do it higher than anybody on that field, I guarantee you. But these people know how to do it over and over and over again with equal or better results over time. So that's what we as creatives, that's one of the hardest things to do, is to discipline ourselves to do that. Not saying that we have to sit down like me. I enjoy sitting down and writing for 8 hours. And some people, like you, that would drive bonkers, and you'd put yourself in a little rubber room with a bullet in your face, you know?
Exactly.
And so you don't have to discipline yourself to do it my way, but we do, as creatives, have to figure out what works for us and then have the discipline to do that. Because it is a job. And as fun as it sounds to sit in that Barcalounger and watch all that stuff, I guarantee contradict me if I'm wrong, but some days you're sitting there going, I hate this job. I wish I could go out and do something normal like hiking, but this is what works. And I do the same thing. I'm sitting there typing going, I hate this job, but this is what works. And if you want to make a career out of it, you have to treat it like a career. You have to treat your enthusiasm. Sometimes you have to supplant with the discipline to just do it because you have to do it whether you want to or not. And if you don't want to do that, that's fine too. That's actually the best situation of all. You get to have a hobby. Hobbies are awesome because you get to do them whenever you want, for as long as you want, and when they stop being fun, you stop doing them.
Exactly. And you don't care if it makes any money or not. That takes the pressure
it's purely
off.
for you.
Yeah. You said a couple of interesting points. One about the pole vaulter, saying that he could do it consistently over and over, not necessarily the greatest one. That's very true also with golfers.
Yeah.
It's not the guy who can shoot the lowest score, but it's the one who can do the lowest score consistently.
Yeah. And when called on, because
and when called on,
like
right.
If somebody calls you and says, I want a song, you can't say, oh, I'm going to turn down this X $1,000 because I ain't feeling it, because it's your job, And people come to me and say, I want a short story or a book or a screenplay or whatever it is. And I'm like, not excited about it. No, I'm thinking, awesome, food for the family. I will make myself excited about this.
Well, I appreciate the way you approach your writing. I had an actor producer on a few months ago, and we got into a similar conversation where I asked him something to the effect of, what kind of advice do you have for people who are just starting out to being actors? And he said, the very first thing you have to decide, and he says, this holds true for writers, anybody in the creative realm. You have to decide first off, right off the bat, whether you're going to do it for a living or whether you're going to do it just because you love doing it. Because he says it's two different things. And you just said that. Yeah, you just said it. You do it for a business. Obviously, you love doing it, but you're doing it to make money, to support your family. You have to have that discipline in order to create product. If it's just something you love to do, then you just do it when you feel like doing it.
Yeah, and that's where and that's exactly right. That's where the discipline comes in. And it's funny because I have people come up to me at Comic Cons or at writing symposia or wherever on these things if there's other guests, and they're like, "You're so lucky," and they say it. First of all, they say lucky like I won the lottery instead of doing any of the work, and that's a little bit untrue because I did a lot of work. I was a lawyer in Los Angeles, and everyone knows how hard they work. And I work much harder as a writer in Idaho than I did.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. Yeah.
But the other thing is, they look at you from the outside and say, you've got this success thing that I want. And I'm like, well, what you don't know is I have a fused cervical discs. So I have pins in my neck. I have a lower back problem that is so off the scales pain-wise that sitting down for more than an hour is incredibly painful. I have so much narcotic in me at any one time. I'm not breaking the law, guys. I've got prescriptions. But I've got so much medicine in me at any one time, it would knock over an elephant because that's my pain level.
Wow.
And I don't get to go in and sit down and go, oh, this is uncomfortable. I guess I won't work today. No, because this is, like you said, it's not my hobby. It's not my passion. I mean, I love it. And I'm so grateful to do it as a job, but it is my job. And so I sit down and I go, wow, this really hurts. And my response to that has to be either, well, I'll take a pill, or if I've already taken my pill, then I have the last out of, yes, I better get working anyway. And it really is. It's a very different paradigm. And I think a lot of people they don't want to be successful. They want to have the trappings of a successful life. But if you really are going to be successful in anything, you're going to be working a lot. And a lot of the time that work is going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be taxing, because that's what defines work. People kind of wish they would write a book or write a song, be in a movie, and then someone would hand them millions of dollars and say, you're successful. And then they never have to do that again. But no matter who you are at the top of whatever game you're at, I mean, you think Bill Gates doesn't work still more than anybody else, even though he's retired. I pretty much doubt he could work any three of us into the ground.
Oh, sure. People that are that successful were driven from a very early age, and it's just in them. They can't stop working. That's really, that's what created their success in the first place. But it's also just a makeup of their character.
Oh, I was just going to say, and that's something you can develop. Just because you're born a flake doesn't mean you have to die a flake.
Well, okay, we could argue that point.
It's important to know, because a lot of people are like, this is scary, I don't want to work that hard. Well, don't jump into 60 hours a week on your hobby. Work your regular job as a waiter or as a analyst or actuarial person or whatever you do. Work that, and then do your hobby for 3 hours a week and see how it feels. And do your hobby for 5 hours a week and see how it feels, and see if you can build up the competence and the willpower and stamina to make this a second job. Because that's another thing, is almost every creative I know who is a successful person in their field, they had two jobs for several years. They had a breadwinning job, like
right.
a money-making job, and then they had their creative job that also took 40 freaking hours a week. And then their creative job started making money. And at one point then, they had a huge drop in money or in income, because they finally decided, I can make enough as a creative person, as a screenwriter or a novelist or a songwriter, whatever. And so they dropped their regular job, which means that income disappeared, and they had a hole now to make up. They were still making money, which is why they dropped their job, but now they had to work even harder to make up the money they had just lost. And so it's this huge amount of work that it eventually takes, but the successful people in creative fields determine that it's worth it for them to have a life they prefer, to have creative freedom that they don't have in a cubicle job or whatever it may be. But if you don't want it that much, that's okay. Success is not definable as I achieved world fame in one area. Success is best defined as, am I happy day to day?
And it's interesting about what you said, with people, the creative people, they always have the day job. The classic one was in New York when I was there, and they said, well, you met somebody, and he said, what do you do? I said, well, I'm a singer, I'm a dancer, I'm an actor, and I'm a waiter.
Yeah.
And that was always the line, they always were waiters.
Yep. You want something funny, just really quick. Go to Los Angeles, to any restaurant that's like a nicer restaurant. I'm not talking about like Carl's Jr., but like a sit-down meal where the waiters are reasonably attractive, and you ask any one of them, how's your screenplay going? Right. They will have an answer for you.
Yeah. Did you get your portfolio done today? How's that modeling gig coming along? Yeah. It's funny. I did something similar to you. I worked for 20 years in the financial district. Very high pressure, good money. I worked 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it was fine. After 20 years, here's the point. The point was, during that 20 years, my creative process shut down to almost zero.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was the problem. See, I couldn't do the actor, singer, waiter bit. I either had to be the actor and singer or the waiter. I couldn't do both.
Yeah.
I worked for that long. But now I'm back to what I love to do.
Yeah.
And all of that, having a new car every year and, shopping at Macy's. And I mean, I don't care about that anymore. I care less.
And that puts you in a position for success. And that's, it's funny because I went shooting with Larry Correia, he's a hugely successful writer, and he's a gun enthusiast, which is a nice way of saying he's a gun crazed person. And I love him, but he's very gun obsessed. And I said, I want to learn some shooting stuff, so will you take me? And he took me, and we had a great time. It was a lot of fun because he unrolled his bag, and there's 817 different firearms. And he's like, "We'll start here and we'll work toward the end." And but it was really funny because he rolls up in a beat up SUV, and he opened it up and he pulled out his duffel with the guns and stuff, and inside there was like a flat inner tube, and there was some sand. Clearly the kids had been playing around, and it was really kind of awesome to see because this is a person who not only is successful, but he knows how to define success in a way that makes him happy, which is, I've got a big enough car to carry my kids and my armaments.
It's nice that he has his priorities.
I don't care if it looks pretty. Yeah. And a lot of that is why it's really hard, I think, in New York or in California, Los Angeles. A lot of these places, they start out really creative and they have a chance, but then they get caught up in the trappings of it. I would see so many of these waiters in Los Angeles, like, how's your screenplay going? Oh, no nibbles on it yet. Hey, that's a nice Movado. What'd that set you back? 1,000? 1,500, because they want to look like successful people instead of learning how to be successful people. And I think somebody like you who worked for 20 years, that's fantastic. Having that other job and making it successful first. Number one, it teaches any creative person how to kind of dial down their narcissism, because creative people are all this weird mix of super narcissistic and cripplingly low self-esteem, because they're all like, I'm going to write something, I'm going to do something that's amazing and everyone will love it. And the first person says they love it and part of you goes, are you serious?
It's very true. Yeah.
It's totally accurate. Having a job teaches you how to subsume the narcissism, because you have to be there and have to take care of things and get things done for other people,
right?
Doing things that don't matter necessarily on an emotional level to you. But aside from that, it also teaches you how to be successful as an artist, because a lot of artists get out there, and I see my friends who are new artists do this. They go, hey, I got a contract. And then they call and say, hey, can you talk to me about this contract? I'm so excited. And I look at it and go, okay, are you aware you're actually giving your genetic rights for all of eternity? So they'll own your children, your grandchildren. They're like, yeah, I just figured that was typical, and I'm sitting there going, it's not surprising that so many people don't stay in the creative fields because they don't have the financial or business sense to keep themselves from getting screwed out of it.
Well, that's why most writers and things have managers. I mean, that's the theory behind it. They do,
but yeah, that is the theory. But their number one priority in a theoretical sense is you. But in a reality-based sense, their number one priority is getting them paid the most money for the least effort. And that doesn't make them evil. That makes them part of the human race. We all have to look out for ourselves, look out for our families. We look out for our smallest tribes, And then if that means I'm going to work a little harder for my other client, as I'm an agent and I've got client B making $1 million a year, and then I've got you making 50,000. I'm sorry, but you're not going to get attention. And if you do get a sale with a contract for another 10 at the same time that Mr. Millions sends over his first $4 million contract, I'm going to spend a lot of time on the $4 million contract, and the $10,000 contract I'm going to look at and go, yeah, it looks fine.
That's part for course. I mean, that's,
yeah,
they're paid on commission. So,
yep.
Just,
and that's why I say it's not a bad thing. It's just reality. And so the more you can go into any creative field with an understanding how to take care of yourself versus an expectation that others will take care of you. I was talking to a guy who was Michael Jackson's manager for one of Michael Jackson's management team for a long time, and he just talked to me. He was actually trying to convince me not to be a writer because he was talking about how the lead impulse of everybody behind the scenes is to get money out of a person, knowing that that person is most likely a flash in the pan, so their best chance to get money is to get as much now and not worry about later. Meaning,
Right.
I'm going to bleed you dry as quick as I can on the assumption that you're going to fall by the wayside. And again, I don't blame anybody with that mindset, because that's a capitalistic mindset. And it's just sort of the reality of how we are. But if you want to be really successful as an artist, you want to go into it with all your artistic ducks lined up in a row. You know, nobody's going to hire you as a songwriter if you suck as a songwriter. Nobody's going to read my books if they're terrible. So you want to know that stuff. That's the first thing you have to learn. But then the first thing you have to know after that is how to run yourself, not as an artist, but as a business. Because as soon as you want to do this as a career, you have now become a one-person, single-stop shop for all your artistic needs in this field. And it's no longer just putting out a product. It is marketing it. It is protecting it.
Right.
It is being prepared to negotiate with it. And that's a whole other set of skills, which again is why, like, when I hear somebody who says I worked for 20 years, or I was, being a lawyer was very helpful. Larry Correia was I was talking about him, he was an accountant. So man, you bet he knows how to audit his publisher's books.
Sure. One thing that you said that was really interesting is that, hold on one second. I'm sorry. Okay. Well, this is why we don't do a live show. So,
one of your big TVs fell over.
No, it's the dog. I'm dog sitting today. So,
I understand.
Yeah. Okay. I just totally lost my train of thought. So let's just move on to something else. Okay. I'll figure out. No, wait a minute. Let me go back, because I know it was a good point. See, there's just so much going on up here in the brain. If my brain if like my brain had a physical appearance, it would have the body of Bruce Lee. Okay? Because there is just so much going on up at the top.
Would it be like an ADHD Bruce Lee, or like, no, I have you, squirrel?
Oh, no, it would be like Bruce in his prime,
Oh, okay.
where like his knuckles had muscles. You know what I mean?
Oh, my gosh, he was awesome.
Oh, God. I mean, see, I don't like those guys that are like, beef. I like those really little compact looking. I think it's much more aesthetically pleasing for me.
I agree. And it's healthier.
Yeah. You watch some of those, like the Thai kickboxers, and the bodies that these guys have got are just unbelievable.
So I've done martial arts my whole life, and I'll tell you what, you have never experienced jabby pain until you have been kneed in the side by one of those guys.
Oh, yeah, it's unbelievable. I love watching that. It's just an incredible sport to me. Meanwhile, my real body, I look more like Curly from the Three Stooges. That's about my speed.
Well, that's just a clever disguise. Like, my grandpa would walk in and he'd look at me when I was younger, and he'd say, nice six pack. And I said, yeah, I look beautiful. And he'd go, too bad you don't have a keg. You may be able to enjoy little sips, but I could pull this thing out and hammer you to death with it. I was like, all right, Grandpa, you.
Well, the one thing I've learned as I've gotten older, now I don't know how old, I suppose I can ask you, how old are you?
I'm 41.
Oh, okay. Well, we're almost a different generation. I'm 54.
Oh, that's not.
Well, let's put it this way.
Different.
We didn't go to the same school, and we probably didn't listen to the same music. So
no, that's true.
We're far enough apart that, I'm not old enough to be your father, but there is a gap.
Maybe that big kid who kicked the crap out of me when I was in junior high school.
Yeah, I could have been the bully down the street or something like that. The one thing I've noticed about as I've gotten older, and I sort of am happy that I never got into that. We were talking about narcissism. I mean, in terms of music and in terms of intelligence and things like that, yeah, like I said, looking at my brain in the mirror, I'm going, ooh, baby, But I never had that physical thing. However, the older I've gotten, the even less it goes. Not to say I don't take care of myself. I try to brush my teeth once in a while and shower on odd Thursdays, But I just don't care anymore. I mean, I had to wear a suit and tie for 20 years going to work.
Yeah.
And
yep.
I tell you, I don't ever even want to wear a collar if I don't have to, T-shirt and shorts.
I hear you.
It's just, So that whole thing is gone for me, that physical beauty, because it doesn't last. I don't care how good looking, and there are some people that I think are really good looking for their age. You always have to say that.
Yeah.
But it gets a little bit ridiculous. Like, I've seen these guys who are in their 60s who still pump iron, like, 6 times a day. And they've got these huge muscles with wrinkles. And it just looks weird,
Yeah, it does.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with keeping yourself in shape, okay, for health reasons. It's when it gets too much over to the vanity side that I start to look at these guys when they're in their 60s who really just are unhappy with the fact that they're getting older and want to go back to looking like they did when they were in college, and they can't do it. It'll never get there. And they don't accept that. They're still like eyeing up the 18-year-old girls. I'm just glad I got rid of that, or never really had a lot of it to begin with, because I think that gets in people's way. Like you said, with the waiter with the $1,500 Movado watch. It's not because he wanted it so he could tell time. It's on his wrist because it looks sexy and because people think, ooh, he spent that much on a watch. Meanwhile, he's eating 10 for $1 ramen noodles in a single room down somewhere in the Bowery with that watch because he can't afford. He should have paid rent with that money rather than buy the watch.
Yeah, and that's that actually brings us back really nicely from the momentary edit. As far as that's a really good thing to strip out of yourself as an artist, I think is that sense of ego. I mean, you have to have a certain ego to say, what I'm going to do is going to make the world better. It's going to be valuable, and it's going to be worth it enough that people will pay money for it. Because otherwise, again, you're in a hobby situation, which is fine, but it's a different situation.
Right.
But that's a creative ego versus an ego that needs to be stroked, that needs to have people tell you how wonderful you are at all times. Because I'm an indie author, I do everything myself. I do all my book covers, I do my layouts, and I do my marketing. So I emailed a book to this book reviewer, and a couple months later they got around to it and emailed me back. It was this long email that said, please don't be mad. And I read it, and the reviewer hated it. And I wrote back to them and said, please let the reviewer know this was a fantastic review. It was well thought. It was very astute. He had legitimate reasons for not liking it for the reasons he liked. I don't like it for A, B, and C because I don't like A, B, and C. And someone reading that's like, I kind of like that kind of stuff. Maybe I should check this guy out, And so a lot of artists burn most, if not many, then most, of their business contacts and opportunities by insisting that everyone view them as the top #1 big kahuna master of all time at all times, instead of accepting, hey, you didn't like it, that's okay. I'm astounded at the number of reviewers that I send my books to that come back and say, we don't do reviews of independent authors anymore because every time we review it badly, that whoever it is, that author writes us a nasty letter and we're tired of it.
Yeah, that's kind of immature.
I'm going like, really, guys?
You brought up an interesting point about this isn't my taste. I don't like ABC. So music, writing, literature, any of it, it's so subjective. It comes down to people's taste. Doesn't make you a bad writer if they just didn't like what you wrote or your style of writing. Musicians, singers tend to fall into one genre. And if that ain't your genre, then you're not going to be successful. In other words, if the record label, they don't do that. If you sing opera and they're a rap label, okay, it's just not going to happen. You could be the greatest opera singer since Caruso, and it just wouldn't make any difference.
Right.
But there are a few, like the Beatles, who were able to write songs that were so diverse that somebody somewhere would like it. I mean, the Beatles wrote music that grandmas liked and that the kids liked. That's not easy to do, and not many bands have done that. In fact, I can't tell you another band probably that has done the same thing. that's why they are the Beatles.
No, and that's a really good point, because that's sort of everyone kind of wants that success, that 4-quadrant success. And I think the closest person we have to it in any genre right now is probably Taylor Swift, because she has such a mass appeal over such a wide demographic.
Yeah, she's gotten close to that. Yeah.
Yeah, she ain't the Beatles, but she's probably the closest thing we've got to that now. And it's funny that you mention that, because a lot of people also, they'll go in and they say, I want to be Taylor Swift. Or if you write a book, I want to be J.K. Rowling, because she's like the first writer who made $1 billion on a series.
Right.
But the thing is, you also have to decide if that's going to make you happy. Not having $1 billion, wouldn't that be fun? Personally, I don't know that it would be fun, but let's assume it is. But you have to decide if it would make you happy writing books for all those people. So like, when I write a horror novel, I know my aunt is not going to like it. She doesn't like horror novels. I write a mystery. I know that my wife is maybe not going to love it because she's not enamored of mystery. If you want that kind of success where everybody loves it, you do have to give up a greater measure of your autonomy, because you then have to craft something that every single person will love.
Which isn't easy to do.
If you love to write, it's very difficult, and it gets rid of a large swath of things. Like Pirates of the Caribbean was this huge moneymaker. It astounded everyone. It was a 4 quadrants movie, meaning that young, old, male, female, everyone liked it.
Right.
But if it had been Pirates of the Caribbean versus Freddy Krueger, it wouldn't have made money, even if it was an astoundingly good movie, because horror has a limited appeal.
Right.
Fantasy has a greater appeal than horror, but there are still limitations on it. You look at the top sellers of books on Amazon, and that are fiction books, and they tend to be thrillers, because thrillers are widely accessible. They don't have too much gore. They usually don't have sex or swearing. Some of them do, but a mainstream thriller is written with very as wide open and fun as they often seem. They've got real serious restrictions. If you want to make money like James Patterson, you're going to have to write those kinds of books, or not write them, since he has other people write them constantly now. But you're going to have to do that kind of genre. And if you prefer to write, mysteries starring gay whales on the verge of extinction, you can't expect to make the same money James Patterson does. So you have to decide how much your artistic integrity is worth versus how much you want to make money. And they're both valid, and oftentimes they do overlap. But the thing is, if you're just attending to your integrity, to your vision, without understanding the possible financial benefits or repercussions of taking that particular approach, you're going to end up miserable, because you're going to be trying to make huge money unconsciously while adhering solely to your ideas, and that doesn't work. It's similarly, if you're just over here trying to make money, you're going to be unhappy because you don't feel fulfilled as an artist. And so you do have to sort of have a knowledge of, here's what I would like to do artistically, here's what I'd like to achieve financially or economically, and then you have to find a way to merge them with the greatest overlap. It's always sort of a Venn diagram. You never write exactly what you want and get exactly what you want as remuneration out of it. And if you think that's going to happen, well, you have better chances of winning the lottery, especially in a creative business. Really quick story. I joined the Writers Guild of America, which is the screenwriting guild in Hollywood. And when I went in there, they said, look, and these are people, by the way, to get into the WGA, you have to have sold screenplays. You have to have made substantial amounts of money to start with. So this is a highly elite group of writers. And they said in the new orientation, they said, look to your left. That person won't be in here in 5 years. Look to your right. That person won't be here in 10. In fact, it is harder, statistically harder, to get into the Writers Guild than it is to become a Major League Baseball player.
Wow.
So that gives you an idea how very careful you have to be as far as being aware of both sides of what you're doing, both financial and artistic, because if you can't find a way to make them mesh and make you happy, you're not going to last.
I did want to ask you one question. We're kind of running to the end of the interview. You're self-published?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. See, that's surprising to me because of the sort of level of success that you seem to project. I would have guessed that you were signed to a publisher, but
well, it didn't work out that way. I literally, my first book, I queried every single publisher in North America, not exaggerating. And they either told me no thank you, or you really need to murder yourself so that no one else will have this inflicted on them.
Yeah.
So I went to self-publishing not thinking I'm going to make $1 million. I went to it thinking, well, my book can't hurt anybody any more than it's already done. So, and that book turned into a huge success, and I have no idea how. When I talk about that one-hit wonder failing, that's me, because the first month this book came out, I think it sold like 6 copies, and I'm pretty sure my mom bought all of them.
Yeah.
And then 6 months later, it was the #1 selling horror and science fiction title on Kindle.
Wow.
And I don't know what happened. And so I wrote a second book thinking, J.K. Rowling, I'm hot on your heels, you know. And the second book, we went back to my mom buying 6 copies, and I had no idea what happened.
It is probably attributed to the internet that you're even able to do this. Because,
for sure.
Yeah, I would say that back in the 70s, self-publishing to any level of success was impossible, because the publishers, like music, people can make it in their homes now. That wasn't possible back then.
And it totally has changed everything, and I'm glad of it. And people are still wary of independent work, which is a legitimate thing, because there is no gatekeeper. And
Right.
for, ratio-wise, there's more crap than there is in traditional publishing. But I am glad, too, that people are giving indies a chance and looking at the other, if someone sees my book that's got 200 reviews on Amazon and it's got a 4.6 average, they're like, maybe I'll check this guy out. But it is hard being an indie. And one of the things is I can't be as good as the traditional stuff. I have to be better. My books have to look better. The covers have to be more intriguing. The title has to be more interesting. And the prose itself has to be better. Because if it's a choice between me, an indie, and Stephen King, who everybody knows, there's no reason to go with me unless they truly, truly like it better. And so that is something for anybody listening. And that goes in music. I have lots of indie musician friends. That goes in any creative field. A lot of people do think, oh, the internet has saved my lack of talent from extinction, And in reality, for most people who aren't willing to do the work, the internet just publicly accuses you of incompetence. And you don't want that.
I wish some people would figure that out, though. I mean,
that's the narcissism side.
Wow. I mean, some of the musical submissions I get for the radio show, oh my God. I mean, some of them are great. I get the whole gamut, from stuff that's like, wow, this guy should be big time, to what the F are you think you're doing, calling yourself a musician? I get the whole thing. And that's the double-edged sword. This is a rant I go on all the time on this show. It's one of my favorite rants. But it really applies to anyone in the creative endeavor.
Yeah, it does.
It's great because people like you can do this from home, and you can put your stuff out, which wouldn't have been possible before. But like you said, there's no gatekeeper.
And it's scary. And frankly, the people who suck at it are screwing it up for the rest of the people who are good at it.
Well, it makes it,
everybody hates it.
Right. It makes it more difficult to find the good stuff, because you've got to wade through all the crap to get to the good stuff.
Well, and not only that, but by the time you do find something good, you're angry, and that's not a good mindset to enjoy something.
What's really ironic, though, is that what I've seen with some of the ones that are like super crap, they tend to be really good on the business side of the thing. Like, they're tweeting 15,000 tweets a day to come check out this piece of garbage song that they just put out. Where the guy who really put out a fabulous song, he might have that problem in his head that, well, the song should sell itself. I shouldn't have to be out there,
And you can't assume that.
And you can't assume that. No matter how good you are, you need publicity.
Yeah, even, I have a friend, it's really funny because he, by any metric, he's quite successful. He has sold, I think it's 5 or 6 novels to major publishers for good money in the last like 2.5 years.
Oh.
And so he's doing really well. And we were sitting talking, and he works. He's a lawyer and a corporate trainer. And he said to me, I want to be a full-time writer. I just don't want to live like one, And it was really telling. Like, he really had his head screwed on right. He didn't want to quit a job that was paying him a lot of money so that he could pursue a passion that was going to make him unhappy because of its economic requirements. But he went out there is the thing, and he's capable, he's competent. His name's DJ Butler, if you want to look up his books, they're very good.
Okay.
But he's competent, and he's got a mastery of both sides of that coin, There are those astounding artists who create works that make the angels weep for happiness.
Yeah.
And the angels are the only ones who know about it, because then they put it in their sock drawer and expect somebody to find it.
Exactly.
And then there's these marketing gurus who sell 1 million copies, and no one else buys anything ever again because they feel betrayed, because they were marketed into wasting their time. And you don't want either of those. You want to be making, I'll tell you what, I will take not making the angels weep for a little bit more business acumen so that I can get good, enjoyable, competent stuff out to the most possible people. And it really is, if you want to be successful, it's about finding that medium. And it goes for traditional publishing as well, because it used to be they would sign you and then they would work with you and they would promote you. And now they sign you a big contract for $30,000, which is a really big contract for a first contract. And essentially they want to see 99% of the time if you can then sell on your own 30,000 copies of the book, at which point they will pick you up again. The world today has changed. There's no sitting in your room. In the days of the heydays of the New Yorker, there were certain people who could literally write a short story and put it out on the desk outside their penthouse apartment with a dollar number attached to it. And when they came out, there would be a check there from one of the editors of one of the major magazines for that amount for each story. That doesn't happen anymore. You have to actively go out and find new markets, find publishers, and find the audience.
The market has been saturated thanks to the internet. So like we
Absolutely.
said, you have to wade through all the crap to get to the good stuff. This has been a really fantastic interview. I've really enjoyed talking to you. And in fact, I'd like to have you come back on the show,
Sure.
and we can do a part 2, in a few months. Your book is called The Longest Con, and what is it about?
Okay, it's really cool. It's got a concept and a conceit. The concept is that we all know that hundreds of thousands of people go to Comic Cons every year to cosplay as monsters. And what we don't know is that thousands and thousands of monsters go to Comic Cons to cosplay as people. But of course, you put monsters and people together, and that's a recipe for disaster. So the organizers of the cons have seeded throughout each convention these people who are essentially undercover air marshals. They're there to stop the mayhem or to solve the murders. And the conceit is that in The Longest Con, I, myself, Michaelbrent Collings, am the main character, one of the wardens who has to figure out who murdered one of these monsters and have to do it before the end of the convention or very bad things will happen. And other of my really good friends who are big authors, like I said, Larry Correia, David Farland is in it, Kevin J. Anderson's in it, Dan Wells is in it, a couple other people, and they're all not just in the convention, but they actually play characters who are magical or evil or funny, and they all have different really fun parts. So it's a lot of fun and a lot of really good feedback from people going, you got Larry Correia 100% right in this book, and things like that. So it's a fun book if you want to be entertained and smile a lot, because it's intentionally funny and it pokes fun at popular media.
Michaelbrent, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was a lot of fun talking to you. I do want to have you back on at some point, because I don't think we're finished talking yet, but we have to wrap this up for the show. So,
well, thank you. I really appreciated being here, and it was a lot of fun, and I would thrill to come back.
Well, that's about all the time we've got for the show today. I want to thank my special guest, Michaelbrent Collings. This is Douglas Coleman saying goodbye.
To the mile, you've got to run, not walk. Give us a